Hello, everyone. We are live. Let us know if you can see us, you can hear us, and I cannot believe. Please type into the chat. Let us know if this is your first Discover workshop. If this is your first workshop with Tiago, you're in for a treat. Tiago, how's it going?
So good, Jess. Really, really happy to be here, joining you once again. These are just some of my favorite workshops to do.
I am ready for this. I have been like lucky to have like a little glimpse into what we're covering today, and I have like my notepad. Ironically, my actual like pen, not additional notes. Uh, but thank you. Type in where you're tuning in from in the chat, and if you're joining us today for the very first time, we're joined with Tiago Forte. And if you're being introduced to him for the first time, he is an internationally recognized speaker, productivity expert. He's the founder of education company Forte Labs. And he spent more than 10 years researching, developing, and teaching the practices of idea management. And this is one I just want to jump in here, Tiago. The things that you're sharing, what I love is that these are things that you have tried and tested. You've worked with other people with. It's things that I think no matter if you're a creator, an entrepreneur, you just want to get better at taking notes and organizing your brain. There's a lot to get out of today's session. Also, he's been featured in the New York Times, Harvard Business Review, Inc., The Atlantic, Quartz, CB Insights, and that is just a small glimpse into what he has done. And Tiago, what can we look forward to in today's workshop?
This is an introductory workshop. Thank you, by the way, Jess. That was a very kind introduction. This is my introductory workshop to the world of digital note taking, and it really is a world. You're gonna see. I'm gonna give you kind of the little appetizer today, but once you get into it, it's kind of like my job is to convince you to become part of this niche, this subculture, to learn about this practice. Because once you get into it, it's a universe of different apps and tools and techniques and thinkers and books. But this is really, I'm going to assume you've never heard of this, or maybe you've heard of it and don't really know anything about it. Digital note taking couldn't be more different from the note taking you learned in school. So
Mm.
use that term, taking notes, but I'm going to completely attempt to change your conception of what notes are, what they're for, how you might put them to use, and what note taking even means in this digital connected age.
I'm looking forward to this. And by the way, I do want to say, when you say like for people who've never heard of this before, what blew my mind was that so your course, you've got building a second brain. Um, it's been taken by more than 2,500 people. So I feel I'm almost like late to the game here. I'm like, wait, what? Everyone seems to know about this. Yeah, looking forward to it. I'll let you take it away, and I will be keeping an eye on the chat for questions because we'll have a Q&A at the very end.
Okay, let's do it.
And okay, and if you just want to share your screen, I will add it in to, there we go. Perfect.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. This is How to Take Digital Notes. This is the workshop that I so wish someone had given me back in school. I mean, in college, but really earlier, high school, middle school, even. It's the thing that I always needed, but never knew that I needed. You know, that word notes or note taking, I'm sure for many of you brings back memories of school, right? That is the main place that most of us were introduced to the idea, oh, you should take some notes. It's the main kind of association that we have with note taking. But for many of us, I know for me, the initial association might be a negative one. When I think back to school, there's a lot of kind of memories that aren't so great. When I was in school, I really didn't think I was smart. I thought, I didn't do particularly well on tests. I only did my homework maybe half the time. I always got very mediocre grades. And I always thought, well, I guess I'm just not one of the smart people. I guess I'm just lazy because everyone else seems to do all the exercises and all the homework and study so diligently, and I just don't, and I'm not interested in that. And it was much later that I came to understand, really, when I started my career, that school doesn't show who's smart. It shows who is good at school, right? School has you memorize facts and then regurgitate them for the tests. Maybe you have some notes that you can review, but it's essentially about memorization. And my mind just wasn't built for that. So many people that I talk to, when they think back to their school years, their mind just wasn't built for school. It just didn't fit the way that their mind operated. So one way of thinking about digital notes and kind of the idea that I designed this workshop around is, what if there was a way to be smart and to be diligent and to produce results and to excel that did not rely on the capabilities of your biological mind? What if these, walls of your skull were not the limits of your potential? What if there was a way that we could extend or enhance or leverage the capabilities of technology, otherwise known as thinking machines, to make up for what we lack and where we're not that capable, but also to just extend and augment our capabilities? That's what I mean by digital notes. It's something way beyond a notepad on your desk, as useful as that is. I'm talking about a lifelong system of knowledge management, which is the academic field that we're drawing from, personal knowledge management. And that's what I want to share with you today. Everything you're going to be seeing here today is excerpted from an online course that I teach called Building a Second Brain. I started it off just over 4 years ago as an experiment, as a little, workshop for just some of my acquaintances and friends. I had no idea that there were so many people out there that had the same curiosity and the same desire that I had. And we are just kicking off actually this morning, the 12th edition. So this course is taught live to cohorts, groups of students that go through the curriculum together. And we just opened the 12th group this morning, and enrollment will be open for the next 10 days. We're expecting over 1,500 students from more than 80 countries. And we have a teaching staff of 40 people that is going to be taking these students through a 5-week journey to actually build their own second brain, their own system for managing their expertise and their knowledge. So that's where you go if you want to really dive into the deep end with us. For today, I really want to introduce you, though, to just the basics of what, how, and why. Okay, so by the time you leave this hour, you'll understand what you should be saving in your notes. What is worth saving? What is worth keeping and revisiting? What apps and tools can you use to save the information and the knowledge in your life that you find valuable? Second, I'm going to look at how. I'm going to show you 3 or I think 4 different specific tools with actual walkthrough videos of how to save quotes from books, excerpts from online articles, and research from PDFs. And then I want to end a little bit on the big picture, which is why this is so important, why it matters, why it's much bigger and more kind of meaningful than just like your productivity. There's really some big ideas about this moment in history, where we are in the history of technology, that is causing so many people to be interested in this. Great. Okay, let's do it. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what are you going to be saving in your second brain? Before we even look at the apps and the tools, I want to show you the content. Okay. And these criteria for what to keep are important because you're not trying to save everything. Okay. You're not trying to create your own Wikipedia. You're not trying to compete with Google. You're not trying to, amass this infinite store of content. I mean, you could, right? We're in an era of tools that are powerful enough that you could try that, but I really don't recommend it. Okay. What you're doing instead is you're saving a personal, think of it like a personal archive of knowledge, like a personal library. You're saving just the 10% or the 5% or even the 1% most inspiring, most useful, most personal, and most easily lost content. And those are the 4 criteria that I want to share with you. So first, just on the level of content, save what is inspiring. And this is something, it's not an analytical question. You can't, use a checklist. You have to listen for a feeling of internal resonance, right? When you come across a quote or a photo or a story or a metaphor or anything that moves you, right? You actually feel something moving inside, some emotion, some inspiration, some feeling that this resonates with you on a deep level. That is something you want to save, okay? Because you can't Google a feeling. In the future, when you need some inspiration for a creative project, for a goal, you're maybe feeling discouraged, you just need like a spark of creativity. You can't Google that. You can't say something inspiring. Okay, that's not how Google works. You need to save over time the stuff that is uniquely inspiring for you. And then when you need a bit of inspiration, you just open up a digital folder and there it is. Second, this is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. Save things that are useful. Okay, think about your work in terms of building blocks. Okay, when you go to build a website or to design a slide deck or to write a help document or whatever is the deliverable or the creative work that you create, what are the parts, the sources, the building blocks that go into that? Okay, think about, the clearest example is probably marketing assets. Think about, saving a screenshot of an ad that you think is good, the headline on a website that you thought was particularly well written, some copy from a sales email that you really like, right? This is actually a long standing practice in marketing and advertising, which is called a swipe file, right? The great marketers and advertisers, they don't sit down to a blank slate and just make stuff up. They have this folder full of rich, interesting material. So what we're doing with the second brain is we're getting the swipe file and extending that practice to everything. Whether you're an engineer, a designer, a horticulturalist, a scientist, an analyst, an entrepreneur, what is the swipe file of interesting, inspiring, useful building blocks that you could save? Third, easily lost, right? Sometimes you have a piece of information, it's a fascinating idea. It's a proposed theory. It's a metaphor that doesn't really have a clear place. Doesn't really have, a folder in your documents folder that it would make sense to save it in. Your second brain is so easily searchable that it's a really good place for stuff that is easily lost. And finally, things that are personal. Think about knowledge that is not available to the public, right? That's the funny thing about Google. Everything on Google is also available to everyone else. And so there's no advantage to knowing it. There's nothing you can do uniquely with that information because everyone else in the world also has access to it. Think about the lessons learned from your successes and failures. Think about personal realizations that you had from previous jobs or from previous experiences or from classes you took or from just your journaling or diary writing where you just process your own thoughts and feelings. These are the 4 criteria that I suggest you keep in your digital notes. Okay, so let me go one level more specific, and then I'm going to show you actual examples. So to get just a little more concrete, think about, as I said, marketing assets. Think about mementos. Someone sends you a nice message. They thank you for something. They acknowledge your work. Save that. Okay, reference and record keeping, records of your finances, records of HR data, home records related to the maintenance of your home, maintenance of your car. Sometimes you just need to reference records, and that's a great use for digital notes as well. Think about new content, ideas for new things that you could talk about, present about, write about. Repurpose content. Maybe you've already written a blog post and you want to repurpose it into a social media graphic or into a webinar or into a slide deck. Think about your favorites. Think about your call and meeting notes. Think about, when you have a call with your boss or a colleague or a coach and you kind of jot down those takeaways, save those. Don't just leave them in some random, downloads folder on your computer or in the notes app in your phone. Save them in one central place, such as a note-taking app. Think about saving the contributions of others. All right, someone, sends you some feedback. They tell you what was working or what was not working about something you wrote, or feedback on your speaking, or feedback on your coaching, or they send you a link to an article on some research that they think might be useful for you. There's this constant, I hope these are all examples that are showing you that there's this constant flow of rich, valuable material around you all the time. right? So you don't have to go and find new things. You don't have to hunt down what is the good knowledge out there. If you just become aware of the valuable information that is coming across your desk and your desktop every day, and you just save, like I said, the 10 or 5% that is most valuable, you're going to have so much to work with.
I'm
Think about
actually
language to borrow, little snippets, terms or metaphors for things or analogies, placeholders. If you leave off working on a project and you're going to get back to it later, can you just save some notes on what you were doing and what progress you've made? Research, inspiration, right? Planning notes, any plans you've made, agendas, outlines, all this stuff are creative assets. I want you to think of this information not just as random files and emails spread around in different places, but as creative assets and creative building blocks.
And on that note, I would actually be very curious if, for those of you watching right now, if you could type into the chat to let us know everything that Tiago has just listed, where are you currently storing that? Like, do you have a place? Is it just like stuck in your head? Because I think just like seeing you laid out like this, Tiago, I was like, I had never even considered some of these things were things that I should be storing and like actually organizing. So curious to see what people are saying in the chat as well as you're going through this.
Yeah.
We've got Notion, Workflowy, Evernote. Okay. I see this is like, okay, we've got people already. Richard, I feel like you're like me all over. I totally, I feel that one.
Yeah, this is good because it's good to think about apps and which app you're going to use as your second brain. Some of the most popular ones are Evernote, which is what I use, but also Notion, Roam Research, Workflowy, Bear Notes, Microsoft OneNote. There's no shortage of options, but that is exactly why you really want to start with what. Because if you dive into a note-taking app, you're going to start kind of doing what they tell you and doing what other people do. But it's really helpful. And I've seen people, get lost in a Notion rabbit hole for like a year, or get into Roam Research for 6 months, and then they come up for air after 6 months and like, wait, what was the point of all this again? Why did I even start this in the first place?
Yes. I feel that one. Great. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to see because as you're going through this, I know just looking at like some previous comments too, it's those little aha moments where you're like, oh, I could do this. Like this is something that is completely doable.
Yeah, that is really the turning point. That awareness, a classic one is you're writing a long email, right? Some emails that I get, they're like FAQ documents. They're like how-to guides. Like the person has spent, I'm sure, 30 minutes or an hour, laying out all the steps, explaining something. And then it's kind of insane if you think about it. An hour of your time, what that's worth, and then you hit send, and then you just go, okay, that email's solved, and you walk away. To me, I'm like, you just created an evergreen asset. Save that. Save it. Even if you don't publish it on your blog right away, maybe it needs more refinement, that's fine. But take one extra 10 seconds after sending that email and just forward that same email right into your digital notes, because guess what? Someone is going to ask that question again. That situation will happen again. And instead of starting back at zero and typing the whole thing up again, what if you just did a little search for some keywords, found the same email, and sent it to them again? Or you even just sent them a link and said, hey, I've answered this at length. Here you go. That is the little mindset shift that we're looking for.
So good. So good.
Okay. So I want to show you some examples now. Let's make this super concrete.
And as you're doing that, just to echo Brandy's point, she says, great point. Where have you been all my life? LOL. Okay, let's add this in here.
So I want to show you every single note I'm going to show you is not a demo. It's not it's not a fake note. These are real notes that I've taken and that I've used. Okay. So I want to kind of give you a taste of what these look like. So here's one. Last year I was starting my podcast, right? Which is a big project. I'm sure many of you have podcasts or would like to one day start podcasts. Sitting down to just make up your podcast from scratch is totally terrifying and daunting, right? That's crazy. You shouldn't start from scratch. People have been down this path before. So what I did is I actually took an online course, this Power Up Podcasting, which is on Teachable, by Pat Flynn, who is a thought leader that I follow. And these were my notes, right? You can see it's not extensive. It's like one page, less than one page, with some tips that he provides in his course. Don't use gradients. Use the same colors as your logo. Make it a square, 3,000 by 3,000 pixels, right? Like these are these little details that wouldn't, they're not like deal breakers if I don't follow them, but they just help me avoid mistakes and avoid pitfalls so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel, from scratch. You can see down here, this wasn't from the course, but I just went on the podcasts app that Apple has, and I wanted to see, examples of cover art. So these are the top shows, and I just wanted to look, okay, what kind of fonts, what kind of images, what sizing do the top shows out there use? And got some great ideas for this. Okay, let me show you a few others. These are some notes. So again, last year I was looking for a book deal, and I ultimately did land a book deal, which is very exciting. And these are my notes from a call with a publisher, which is really interesting because this didn't end up being the publisher that I worked with. Okay, so on one level, you might think, oh, it was not successful. I did not succeed in getting this publisher to offer me a book deal. But what I did is on the call, I think I was on my phone in the street, walking down the street with my AirPods in my ears. I just wrote down a few of the things that they said were interesting. Right? This is a quote. The editor I was talking to was like, "Oh, I like this because it's part of the digital future that we're all leaning into." And I was like, "Oh, wow. That's a great little bit of language. It's a great little quote, a great line that I could use." And I think I actually got that line, put it into the proposal. So I'm actually using even an unsuccessful call to make the thing that I'm working on better. Some other things. Okay, so this was interesting. Early last year, I kind of made the jump from a solo creator working on my own to starting to hire people. And so suddenly, this was January of 2020, I had the whole new job, which was to be a manager. And I'd always been a solo creator, working by myself. I had no idea. How do you hire? How do you do performance reviews? How do you evaluate performance? How do you give them coaching? It was like this whole thing that I had to learn. And so someone shared, I think on Twitter, a link to this post about questions that you can ask as a manager. Think about how useful this is. Look how many, right? How many years of experience would it take to compile a list such as this one? Think about that. Now, I'm probably not going to ask all of these. That would be kind of insane, but I can go through and just pick the ones that are most relevant at any given time. And, this resource is not just, a bunch of text. It is actually something that makes me better at my job, which is to manage people. Maybe one or two more. Let's see. Here's a little memento, right? This is something I really wish more people did. It's funny. You don't remember all your successes. You remember that one failure that you had 2 years ago where you really messed up and really did something wrong, right? It's like our brains have such a bias towards the negative and the bad. And so this is something I like to do, which is anytime I have any kind of success, I mean, something as small as someone DMs me on social media and says something nice. In this case, it was a bit better. My ebook was #1 in the free category for time management, which is just a cool thing. Like such a nice little victory, such a nice little milestone. Of course, a few hours later, it was no longer #1. But while it was, I just took a quick screenshot. And now anytime I kind of need some encouragement or some motivation, I have like this little evidence that, I've done good work and I'm doing good work and I can make it through. And let's just choose one more. This is good. I was trying to come up with a subtitle for my book, and all sorts of people, my agent, my editor, random people on social media were telling me ideas. And I couldn't decide. There were too many options. And so I just saved them all to this note. And when the time comes to really make a decision, I'll have kind of a compendium of some of my best ideas.
So quick question, Tiago. So you have this, I see Tiago's 100 notes, and you have these different pockets of information that you've noted down. Is there a way that you're organizing them, or is this just like you add, as they come in, you add them into the specific section.
Yes. Let's see. Is there a way that I can add a link to the chat or no?
Yeah, I actually think if you were to post it in on the right hand side, it should end up on directly in YouTube, I think, actually. If not, feel free to send it to us and we can post it in. Also, I see some really great questions in the chat. Definitely hold on to them because at the very end, we're going to be going through and answering your questions live. So, Lisa, and I see there's some other ones for sure.
Okay, I just put the link into the private chat so you can go ahead and share that.
Awesome.
So yeah, let's zoom out here for a minute before I kind of get into the how-to. The methodology that I teach is called CODE, CODE. And those letters stand for the 4 stages of the creative process. Okay, it's like a pipeline. It's like a factory. It's really funny because we think, oh, we're creative knowledge workers, we're creative professionals. We left behind the manufacturing, the factory of the past, and now we're much more creative and much more spontaneous, which is true. But in another way, we're still just a factory. Information comes in, gets processed, and gets exported or shared or published or sent to somewhere else, right? And I actually like the metaphor of a factory because it's simpler. Right? If you think of this like crazy network of ideas and interlinking nodes and a knowledge graph and all these crazy concepts, those are fun to think about. But when I sit down to just, get my to-do list done, I don't want to think about this crazy network. I want to just think linear step by step. So everything that we're looking at in this workshop is really focused on the C. That's the beginning point. You can't do anything else until you just have the knowledge that's floating out there saved in a place that you trust and that you control, which is your digital notes app. But then, of course, that's just the beginning, right? Once you capture it, you can organize it. The link I just shared is to my methodology for organizing digital files or digital notes. It's called Para, which you can read at length, which is the most popular post on my blog. But really, before you even get there, you have to start capturing. So to answer your question, yes, there are subsequent stages: organize, distill, and express. But I think in the beginning, for people just getting started with digital note taking, you really want to focus on capture.
That's very doable. That's actually not the answer I was expecting. I thought you were like, oh yes, so what you do, and then there's like this whole like thing behind it. But that's easy. That's doable. You capture it first. Let us know in the chat if that feels doable for you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that link is a 2 or 3 part series. It's free. The beginning of the series is free. That is a very detailed how-to guide for Para. So yeah, I'm just going to say there is a solution to organizing. We're not just going to dump notes into a giant inbox and then say, okay, now I have a second brain. There are subsequent steps, but let's continue on capture. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. So what does this look like in terms of capturing? There's 3 of the most, I'd say, frequently used examples that I want to show you. Okay. And here's the thing is there's a real pitfall in this process of building a second brain that you try to save everything. You try to save all the information from all the sources perfectly. And if you try to do that, you will immediately grind to a halt and make no progress whatsoever. Okay. So I want to show you these 3 examples because if you did nothing but save the best highlights from ebooks, excerpts and quotes from online articles, and parts of web pages, excerpts from web pages, you would be ahead of 99.5% of people. Okay. This is such low-hanging fruit, right? Like think about what the average person does in terms of, curating their own information. It is nothing, absolutely nothing. So if you just do something, just to have 2 or 3 kinds of information that you get started with, you are light years ahead of everyone else. Okay. So these are kind of the 3 ways that I got started. When I first started taking digital notes, I didn't think about anything like knowledge management, a second brain, cognitive enhancement, none of this stuff. All I wanted to do was save some quotes from ebooks, online articles, and web pages. So that's where I want to kind of get you started. Okay. So let's start with ebooks. Okay. This works, or this example I'm going to show you is for the Kindle, both the Kindle hardware device, like the actual Kindle, but also what I actually use is the Kindle app which is a free app on the iPad. Okay, it works equally well with both. But think about if you are someone who reads books, think about what an incredible investment that is. Okay, you're already spending, 5 to 10 hours to read a book. It's an incredible cognitive commitment, right? Putting aside all the other stuff you have to do, all the other distractions to read a book. Oops. It's such a big investment. So, what you can do with highlights is, and this is going to show on the screen, is if you just put your finger down and drag it across some text that you find inspiring, useful, you think might be easily lost or is personal, it will show you every single highlight that you've made in one single list. If you then hit share and export those notes, you can actually, with a few taps or a few clicks, export not the entire book, which you wouldn't want anyway, but only the parts that you highlighted. Okay, so it's basically you're spending 99% of the time already reading the book. Why not spend an extra 1% just to save these highlights to your digital notes where they become searchable? They become something that you can annotate, you can bold and underline, you can add your own commentary, and ultimately, if you want to, you can share. Okay, this is really, if you read books, this is really where I would start. This is a built-in feature with Kindle. Okay, maybe you don't read books. I mean, books are a big deal. We just had our first kid in October, and I have to say my book reading has plummeted because it's rare for me to get even, an hour or two in my day that's not interrupted by, naps or feeding or diapers or something like that. So I totally 100% get it. But think about, you see on Facebook or Twitter or recommended to you in an email newsletter, an interesting article. Okay. So what you could do is use what's called a read later app. Okay, so let's say someone sent you this article on externalities, and you kind of browse through it and you say, oh my gosh, this looks fascinating, but I do not have time for this. If you just hit the share button, you can save it to an app called Instapaper. Instapaper. Okay, which then becomes basically your reading list. Becomes like a personalized magazine with all the stuff that you said you want to read. So later on in the evening, on the weekend, when you have more time, when you open up this article, it opens in this very kind of simple, aesthetically pleasing, easy to read format in black and white. And then it's the exact same process as for ebooks. You add highlights of the parts that you find interesting, inspiring, unique, counterintuitive. Those highlights can be automatically synced to a digital notes app such as Evernote. You can see them right there. You don't have to export, you don't have to share, they just appear within a few seconds. Okay. Now, this one requires a bit of a hack. Okay. So there's a service called IFTTT, which stands for if this then that. And if you go to ifttt.com and do a search in the search bar for that, what's called I think it's called a recipe inside that blue box in the middle of the screen. It's called Append Instapaper Highlights to Evernote. Just search for that. And maybe someone who is web savvy can find the link to it and post it in the chat. What you'll do is you'll sign into Instapaper, sign into Evernote, and it creates kind of like an integration. It creates like a connection between two apps that normally don't work together. So in this case, it's completely free, by the way. You don't have to pay for anything. Any highlight that you make in Instapaper automatically gets sent to Evernote. And you can use other apps as well. Another alternative to Instapaper is Pocket. Pocket is another what's called a read later app. And then, of course, there's alternatives to Evernote, such as Notion, Roam, OneNote, etc. Okay. So third example is web pages. Often you're on a sales page or an FAQ page or a pricing page or maybe even an article, and you don't really want to go through those steps of saving it to Instapaper and then going back to it later. There's a Chrome extension, a free Chrome extension called Liner. Okay, Liner. I believe it's getliner.com, that adds this little button right there to your Chrome toolbar, which if you click it, it turns your cursor into a highlighter. Okay, so now anything that you select gets highlighted right there on the page. You don't have to move it anywhere. You don't have to copy paste it. Then if you hit share, as you can see there, you can export only the highlights, only the parts that you said you want to keep directly to your digital notes app. And you can see it saves the name of the web page, it saves the date, the author, and saves the original link in case you want to find the original source. Okay. And like I said before, now that it's kind of within your world, within your control, you can add your own annotations, you can add your own commentary, you can bold the parts that are most relevant, and then share it. Right? Share it with a colleague, share it with a client, share it with a, someone, a friend that you think might find this excerpt valuable. And then I think I'm going to skip that one actually. Okay. Oops. So I've shown you a few different options, but there's a way to sort of automate all this, right? If you're willing to spend, I think there's a plan for like $5 a month and another one for 8 or 10 a month. I don't get any compensation for referring you to Readwise, but Readwise is a really excellent service that you can subscribe to that basically does everything I just showed you automatically. So when you make a highlight in an ebook or in an article, it will automatically appear in your notes, and you don't need to set up any of those little integrations. Okay, so basically, I'll pause after this, Jess. I'm guessing there's some questions and comments before we get to the why. But think about what are called capture apps or capture tools. Okay, they're all over the place, and many of them you're probably already using. Okay, let's go from left to right. If you like taking voice memos, right? You're walking on the street or you're driving in the car and you kind of want to just speak out loud, you can use an app called Otter, which is that blue one on the left. Have a transcription generated of everything that you say. But the key is that last step of hitting share and send to your notes app. If you use a Relator app, which is that big I, again, take the time to set up that little integration and save those highlights. If you have a scanner app, Jess, before we started, you mentioned that you take paper notes. That's perfectly fine. I'm not against, paper notes are not our enemy here, right? But download a free scanner app. The one in the icon is one called Scannable that I use that allows you to just take a little photo and then it saves an image of those notes in a way that's searchable. You can even search your handwriting. Okay, screenshot apps. This is one called Sketch. Book notes from apps such as Kindle or Apple Books or Web Clipper. Evernote makes a free Web Clipper, or you can use an add-on extension such as Liner. So I know that there's a bit of complexity here, right? Like you need to do a bit of work to set these things up or download them or install them. And I think the reason that there's a bit of complexity is that the big tech giants don't really want you to do this, right? It's sort of like we're hacking these systems, right? Like Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, they don't want you to extract and take your information out of their apps and save them in a place that only you control, right? So they don't make it easy. They don't incentivize it. They don't build ways that make it super, super frictionless, which means that we have to put in a little bit of effort to make it happen, but the rewards are just tremendous. Now that information is yours. It's under your control, under your, in your domain, which is the starting point of everything that comes later.
This is fascinating. I had no idea about the scanning app, because that, even just like for your to-do list, to be able to like add that somewhere else. There was an interesting question here. Where did it go? It was around like podcasts and audio. Is there a way to, outside of transcribing it, is there a way to save like chunks of audio into your?
Yeah, audio is one of the frontiers right now. So, this practice, this field of PKM, personal knowledge management, it's new, it's emerging. It's like the frontier of technology in many ways. So there's a few different options. One that someone just put into the chat here is called Air. It's Air with an extra R. So the website is airr.io. .io. That's it. Maybe someone could add that to the public chat. So that's one option. Another one is Otter. What I like to do is listen to the podcast and then repeat back what I heard that I found interesting into Otter. And just that little step of having to say it in my own words, I go, oh, okay, I'm actually processing it at a deeper level. You can also, if you're listening to, say, Audible, there's a bookmark feature. So I like to do this in the car. In the car, you may have your phone up there, but you don't want to be, please, no one listening to this, do not be, switching apps and cutting and copying and pasting little bits of text. Just do not do that. It's not safe. But if you have the Audible app and you're in car mode It's kind of cool. A lot of apps now have car mode where it just shows like a simpler interface, like play and pause. But in the Audible app, there's a little button that says bookmark. So, if I'm doing a few hour drive listening to an audiobook, I'll just put a bookmark on the parts that I want to save. And then I go back later and I just listen to those parts again and write them out. So
Mm.
I wouldn't say there's a perfectly seamless, effortless way to save excerpts from audio yet. But every couple months, there's, an improvement and there's new things coming out.
Interesting. That's super helpful. Now I do have a follow-up question as far as so just with and by the way, please type in your questions in the chat if we haven't gotten to them yet. Uh, when you're going through, so I believe this is probably like a behavior or a habit that you have to build of when you're looking at something rather than just being like, "Oh, I'll come back to it," actually making the conscious decision, take a snippet, save it elsewhere. Are you intentionally, because you broke up the different categories for where you should be storing, like the personal, the like knowledge. Are you keeping that in the back of your mind and you're intentionally looking for those things? Or is it more so something just kind of comes up? You're like, oh, actually, this would be a good fit for this category.
Yeah, great question. So this is also the PARA method. So let me just say a little bit about it. PARA is, again, an acronym, four-part acronym. I'm really into four-part frameworks. But it stands for, the P is projects, the A is areas, the R is resources, and the second A is archives. And I think the reason people find it so impactful is it's only four categories that encompass your entire life and your career and your business and any project or endeavor that you ever take on. It is four truly all encompassing categories. And part of the value of organizing your notes or files using Para is it has you formulate what some of those categories are, right? So the P for projects. Make a project list. This is an exercise. I do it in the course. Everyone goes, "Oh, really? Like, that doesn't sound that cool or innovative." Like, make a project list. And then 20 minutes later, after they've done a first pass, they're like, "Oh my gosh," they have all these like world changing realizations, because everything we do these days is project centric. Like, projects are actually getting more prominent and getting more important, partly because projects now happen across organizations.
Mm.
Right? It's not like, oh, it's just you and your colleague. Most projects these days, there's an outside contractor, there's someone in a different company, there's a customer over here, there's a consultant, there's a freelancer. It's like there's many organizations involved. What they gather around, the central thing, is a project with a beginning and an end and a goal, right? So projects are getting more important, but it is really shocking how few people and how infrequently we take the time to truly identify what are the active projects in my life. And so what I have people do is just create folders or notebooks for those projects. And once they do that, they start seeing raw material that they want to collect everywhere, right? Just walk through your life. And it's really wild. Once you kind of have done this project list, you'll notice like a poster on the street that has some cool graphic design, and you'll take a photo of it and be like, oh, I could use that typeface in a slide that I'm creating, right? Or
Mm.
you're reading like a book on poetry, and the writer uses an interesting, unusual word, and you go, wow, that would be really cool for an essay that I'm writing. It's like this is really the writer's mindset. It's the artist's mindset that every moment of life is an opportunity and is giving you some raw material. It's giving you something. And if you just take that and save it and use it as your creative fuel, not only do you have more creative fuel, which is better for your productivity and creativity, but life gets more interesting. You actually pay closer attention. Things are more enriching. Experiences are richer because you are seeing them through this multi-layered lens, and you're looking at it, as a source of inspiration rather than just something that's happening. So that's some of the deeper implications of what happens when you start curating notes in this way.
I really appreciate your perspective on this, though, because I think a lot of the times when we talk about productivity, it feels like it's a very like analytical thing. Like it's not. There's no room for creativity. There's no room for inspiration. This is purely like to-do lists. Like and just like you describing that, at least someone who feels like they're more of a creative person. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the chat. It just feels like a big weight off your shoulder. You're like, oh, I can apply this and still keep that aspect of myself, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think so. Brandy, apparently you answered her question in real time. And then the last question was, will you be covering the organize, like so the O in code today, or is there a resource you recommend for that?
It's really maybe someone on behind the scenes could post the Paralink again.
Mhm.
So this is an in-depth, step-by-step how-to article that will show you how to get started with Para. Like I said, it's by far the most popular article on my blog. It's honestly just too much to cover right now. It's kind of like I want you to get your feet wet and to get your hands dirty capturing content before you worry about what you're going to do with it. This is actually key because if you get too caught up in what you're going to do with it, most often that just stops you from even starting anything in the first place. Right. And this is the value of separating these steps. Capture without thinking about what's going to come next. Organize just for the sake of organizing. Distill when you know what you want to create and when it becomes clear the project that you want to use it in, and then express when you're actually in the moment and it's time to actually execute. Like there's something useful, it's kind of like when you do writing. If you try to write and edit your writing at the same time, it is extremely painful and stressful and you
Mm.
can't make progress, right? Because your creative voice is saying, oh, we should write this. And the editor in your head goes, no, that's not good enough. That's bad. Like people will think you're stupid. And so you just keep going between these two voices and do nothing. So I want you to capture just on its own. And then once you have something to work with, that's really what you want to wait for. I'd say at least like a couple dozen notes that you have there. Because then when you go to Para and you go to organize, this is another pitfall. People try to create the perfect organizational system before there's anything to organize. They create all these
Oh.
empty folders, this grand hierarchy, this beautiful pyramid of knowledge with the layers and the taxonomy and all these things, but it's not based on the real material that they have to work with. It's based on some concept. And so what happens, you get to the next day, you actually start your work and this pyramid of knowledge just becomes this crazy, far-flung concept. I really encourage you to start with just the little concrete bits of stuff that you're actually encountering day to day.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, and last question. Last question. Vidana is wondering, what does the D stand for? So it's capture, organize,
Distill.
distill.
Yeah, I'll just say a few things about distill. Distill is actually the thing that most people miss. Everyone knows we need to capture, we need to write things down. Organizing is very, very well known. But here's the thing. Once you've captured a bunch of stuff and organized it, you run into a completely different problem. And many of you actually who have been in this world might already have experienced this, which is there's just too much. There's way, way, way too much that you saved. Which is kind of crazy because you're saving the 1% or the 5% of the best stuff. Even if you're so selective and have such a high bar for what you capture, before long, you're going to have just such a great volume of content to work with that it's going to be unmanageable. So distill is really about getting your notes, which can be long, right? Like if I save my highlights from an ebook, just the highlights might be like 1,000 words. It's almost a book unto itself. So there's a step that a lot of people miss that is really essential, which is to distill, right? It's to summarize the key points of a note. And I have a whole nother method to do this called progressive summarization. There's also a series, an article on my blog that you can find out more. But basically, we're just using very simple methods like highlighting and bolding and underlining to just kind of point out the main points of a note. So when you come upon a note, you don't have to start at the top and read the whole thing top to bottom, but your eye can sort of jump around from key point to key point. So as I said, wait until you are needing that to really get into that, but that is the third step.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. That's super helpful.
Okay, so we're gonna finish up here.
Oh, and just for anyone that's catching the replay in the chat, E is for express.
So I kind of want to zoom out here. This takes effort. Hopefully you can see this isn't just download an app and be done with it. There is a practice here. There is a discipline. There are some things to learn. But I think the reason that so many people are really getting into this and there's a huge hunger for it, a huge demand, is that I think we're crossing from information overload, right? Which was kind of the first, era of the internet where, oh, there's just too much to manage. There's just too much information. I think we're crossing over into something which I call information exhaustion. It's like the next level. There's now so much information, not just out there on the internet, but in our email inbox, on our desktop, popping up on our phone, that it is literally taxing our biology. It is actually affecting the way our minds work, the stress levels in our body, the amount of sleep that we're able to get. I mean, on a physiological level, the amount of information that we have, not just that we have exposure to, but that we have to make sense of, but that we have to manage, is skyrocketing. Just to give you some basic numbers, and these are old. This is back from 2014. The average information consumption per day for the average person today is 174 newspapers worth per day. We spend 11.8 hours per day consuming media on our devices. And that is the equivalent of reading 113,000 words per day. And it's increasing by 2.6% per year. Okay. So absolutely overwhelming amount of information, which is creating this phenomenon that I call FOMI. Okay. FOMI, it's like FOMO, the fear of missing out, except it's the fear of missing information. It's this constant pervasive fear that there is something slipping through the cracks, something we're missing, something that's being lost, some little tidbit of information or knowledge or data that we are losing, that just haunts us with this constant feeling that there is some kind of something valuable in our digital lives that we're missing out on. And the antidote to this is building a second brain. So this is really the problem or the pain that we're trying to solve with building a second brain. But there's a particular way we're doing this, okay, which I call the mindset of a creator. It's not just that you're saving things in a digital notes app. It's not just that you're organizing stuff. It's not just that you're distilling it. Those things are important. But like I said, if you just keep collecting, and collecting, you're kind of like a digital hoarder. Right? It's like that person whose garage, you can't even open the garage door because all the stuff that they've been hoarding will just, pile out and collapse like an avalanche on you. We can do that in the digital world as well, right? We can become digital hoarders. Okay. So the antidote to information exhaustion and to the fear of missing information is actually deeper. It's a mindset shift. It's a mindset shift to become not just a consumer of information, but a curator. A creator, from consumer to creator. Okay. And this is the fourth letter of code, which is E. It's actually the most important. Okay. If you only collect information and never do anything with it, never express it, never share it, it actually just becomes this kind of like internal burden that just stresses you out even further. So, we talk about things like the creator economy, you might have heard of, the creator movement. It's this big trend that's happening now of people going and creating online courses and their own podcasts and their own paid newsletters. I mean, Teachable is a big part of that. I'm a big advocate of this. But what I think people are really missing is that relatively few people will become like a professional full-time creator, right? Relatively few people will make a full-time living, teaching an online course or whatever. But that doesn't mean all of us can't be creators. I think this is the true implication of the creator movement, is that each and every person today needs to create things, right? They have an element of creativity in their work, because if they don't, then there's probably a machine that's going to be doing that soon, right? It's like every job, every profession left for human beings has an element of creativity, which means each of us needs to start thinking of ourselves as creators. Right? Think of a definition of creating as bringing something good, true, or beautiful into the world. Right? Anyone who is bringing something good, true, or beautiful into existence is a creator. Whether that's having a kid, planting a garden, doing a home renovation, writing a carefully thought out email to a colleague, managing someone, starting a business, selling online information products. Each and every one of us has this creativity as part of our work. So as part of this mindset shift from just consuming to creating, there's a few things that will change. And I kind of want to highlight those for you. One is that, ironically, actually, you go from public to private ways of interacting with information. Think about how so many of us interact with information. It's like we're doing it in real time. We're doing it in conversation, we're firing emails back and forth, or we're putting things on social media. But the secret of the creative lifestyle is actually that so much happens in private, right? In order to come out with that amazing podcast or that amazing blog post or whatever it is, you need this private creative process. You need this private kind of garden of knowledge where you develop and really refine your ideas before you go out in public. So ironically, when you decide to be a creator, you actually do more in private so that when it's time to go public, what you have is much higher quality. Second, when you start creating things, you really focus on the creative aspects of your work. Your whole kind of focus shifts from what is novel to what is timeless. So much of our behavior online, it's new, right? What is the notification? What is the update? What is the status? What is the newest thing that just happened? But when you begin to focus on creativity, you actually realize, wait a minute, I can't put my attention on what is new all the time. I need ideas. I need thinking and knowledge that is timeless. You start spending your time curating and saving knowledge for the long term rather than just for the needs of the moment. Your attention shifts from what is sensational, right? Basically, what the tech platforms and social media networks and algorithms want you to look at, which is whatever is clickbait and is hype and is sensational, to actually what is more subtle, because you have your own second brain, your own digital notes, where you decide what is there. You decide what is important. You decide where you want to spend your attention. And finally, you just change how you spend your time. You actually start spending less time consuming because you just look at your digital notes and you go, wait, I have dozens or hundreds of good ideas already. What's the point of consuming yet another PDF, yet another how-to guide, yet another, whatever it is? Let me actually put to use the knowledge that I already have. With digital notes and a second brain, you actually are confronted. You actually see tangibly all the knowledge and expertise that you already have. And when you see it in front of you, you can't help but want to do something with it. And that's it. That is the importance. This kind of point of creating things, of being creative, really is the ultimate purpose of building a second brain. It's not about capturing and organizing and highlighting and bolding all these things. All of those steps are just a means to an end, which is sharing what you know, right? Whether you teach online courses or not, I don't care. But in some fashion, in some form, there are other people around you. There are other people out there that can benefit from your lessons, your realizations, your insights. And it is just the most rewarding and inspiring and meaningful thing that I've ever found, to commit yourself to sharing what you know in some form rather than just keeping it private to yourself. And I hope that's what you take away from this whole concept of building a second brain, is that it is a creative a process and a pipeline for getting what you know out into the world where it can really make a difference.
Tiago, this has been so helpful. And I think, and first of all, can we give a big thank you to Tiago into the chat? But again, like, I think the work that you're doing really is speaking to people who maybe wouldn't think that this is something they can do, wouldn't think that even the thought of like organizing their thoughts and being more thoughtful in the approach of how they learn is something that they'll be able to do. And the way that you've broken this up, I think, is just so encouraging. It's so important that people see that there isn't like a type of person that can do this. It's very much achievable for a lot of people. Now, I do know that you are launching your course, and I have some very selfish questions because as I've been going through this, I'm like, okay, I'm signing up for this cohort because I really do want to
Nice.
learn more about this. So hopefully I'm asking questions for people in the chat as well. But actually, let me just type into the chat here. This is a link if you guys want to join. I would love if you join me too, if this is resonating with you. Couple questions. So as far as the time commitment, how long is this program? Kind of like, what does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a 5-week program. It runs from May 5th until June 4th. We meet the main sort of class session is on Wednesdays, so 5 Wednesdays in that period, from noon Eastern to 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. And so that's sort of like the main class. It's kind of like in college, right? You have like the main class with everyone, but then that is just the very tip top of the iceberg because we have a whole teaching staff of 40 people. I'm only the lead instructor for a group of 40 people. 36 of those people are students who took the course in the past, and we hired and recruited and trained to come back and share what they know. So this is kind of insane, but every week of those 5 weeks, 30 mentors is what we call them, alumni mentors, are teaching their own sessions. So this is less like a course where you just like take the curriculum step by step, and it's more like a conference. Think about a conference. Like you go to this place, this big conference center, and then it's like choose your own adventure, right? You have a menu of options, but unless you took the course 24/7 for 5 weeks, you could not, there's no way to attend all the sessions, and you don't want to, you shouldn't, right? Because you choose the sessions based on a few different criteria. So one of them is there's a beginner track and an advanced track. Okay. Even during this workshop, there were probably parts you were like, okay, yeah. Like if you're new to this, you're like, okay, I think that makes sense. And other things I said, you were just like, what? That was so obscure and nerdy and used words that I don't even understand. And that's why I'm telling you, like, I really encourage people to go on the beginner track because the advanced track really gets into the weeds. But, that's one way that you can kind of consume just the content and do the exercises that fit you and not have to swallow everything. So that's one way. Another way is your note-taking tool, right? So if you use Evernote, Roam, Notion, Bear, OneNote, Apple Notes, Google Keep, you're going to have a whole, set of things that apply only to your note-taking app. So just that decision alone eliminates, the 70 or 80% of the sessions that don't apply to your app.
Mm.
And there's a few other criteria. Like some people want to focus more on capture. Some people want to focus more on organize and distill. Some others more on express. It depends how long you've been doing this. It depends on your goals. It depends if you're like someone who publishes work externally. And then we have groups based on professions. Like some sessions are more like for designers and artists, and others are more like for software engineers and analysts. So like you can choose based on your learning style, based on your temperament, based on the kind of people that you resonate with. So it's really like a choose your own adventure. And we give you lots of orientation in how to choose the sessions. But basically you have 160 sessions over 5 weeks out of which you create your own personalized curriculum.
So this is another point to stress as well, which is that this isn't just like a course on how to do this. This is very much a live program. And when I'm seeing the chat, where did you go? We had two people who joined. Amanda says, I'm going to try and register. Latifa said, I signed up already and cannot wait. Please tag us by there on social to let us know so I can look out for you specifically in the cohort. But also to the point of the cost, it'd be great to kind of cover what the investment is. But to Nicholas's point, they say 5 weeks and lots of mentoring. 1,500 is perfectly reasonable. Could you share a bit more of the price point, what the options are for people who want to enroll?
Yes, absolutely. There's 3 tiers. There's 3 levels. The first one is called Essential. And we called it that because it really is like, if you're just getting started with this and you don't have much time, you're busy, you want to know the need to know. Okay, I'm not a crazy internet productivity nerd. I have a family, I have a job. I actually just want to solve my problem and get the benefits, the 80/20, and not nerd out on this full time. So the Essential Edition is that need to know. We don't throw. So the Premium Edition, which is the second one, which this cohort is 3,000. We have like 10 advanced workshops, 7 expert interviews, 5 extra live Q&As. But we purposefully put those as part of the Premium Edition because really the entry level is the Essential Edition. So yeah, Premium Edition just gets more time with me, twice as much time with me actually. A library of my best Q&A answers from the past few cohorts, advanced workshops, expert interviews, and then a 12-month subscription to my blog, which is called Praxis.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, and then there's the executive edition, which is 6,000. I only have 12 spots for that. Actually, now I think only 10, which is for people who have very little time, want to work directly with me, can afford it, or often have their companies paying for it. A lot of CEOs, a lot of people who really just want to work with me directly to have the fastest way to building their second brain. And really, the tiers just mean more time with me as you go up the levels, and more different kinds of support and more kinds of, I would say, kind of advanced content. And we do, $1,500. I know there's this, it's funny, if you compare it to a self paced course, which is what so many people think of when they think online courses, just seems astronomically expensive. But you have to understand this really isn't comparable to a self paced course. Okay. The whole course is delivered live. You're on live calls with me, with my staff, with the alumni mentors, with other students. So people come away from this program not just with, oh, I got a bunch of content. I sat at my computer by myself and watched a lot of videos, right? I mean, we cry on these calls. We laugh. We have amazing personal breakthroughs. People, say things like, "This is the most impactful educational experience of my life." For a recent cohort, someone said, "I went to Harvard. This was as impactful as my Harvard education." What does a Harvard education cost compared to this? I really, I really am willing to stand toe to toe with the best MBA programs, the best corporate trainings, the best, weekend professional development seminars in terms of impact and results. And I think when people compare us to those, the pricing really is incredibly affordable, especially the essentials tier.
For sure. And I think like if you think of when you're, and again, I'm saying this kind of like you're preaching to the choir, and I'm so excited. And please let us know if you've joined so we can like even just kind of bounce off like ideas and takeaways. But I think when it comes to like this topic specifically, there's something about having a community and being able to have some accountability. If you're anything like me, I know for me, I'm like, yeah, I should definitely work on like setting up a system, but like you procrastinate. And the reason you procrastinate is the very reason why you should actually take the time to do this. So the fact that it is a live program, it is a live cohort that, you can connect with people that are also going through similar things, I think is you can't get that anywhere else. So really, really appreciate you sharing this. I can't wait to go through it. I hope you guys join because yeah, for the investment of a live program with like sessions and like Q&As, it's super valuable.
Yeah, thank you. I really believe it. Um, and yeah, it's for people who want that level of engagement. If you don't, there's tons of free content on my blog. Like really start there. Give it a try, right? By trying it and giving it your best shot, the weaknesses or what you're missing will quickly be revealed. And then if you decide to join the course, you'll actually have a better sense of what you need to learn. Really, we offer every kind of education from 100% free all the way to like an executive program. And the goal is really just to meet people where they're at, give them the level of attention and the level of coaching that they're interested in, that they can afford. Because really, we're a very mission-driven organization, a mission-driven team. I really believe these tools are going to completely change the world. Like the invention of the internet and technology is great, but the education for it is missing. Think about all the people around the world who have technology, have phones, have internet connections, but they don't actually know how to capitalize on that access. The human side has been missing. Like this is why I say these are the workshops I wish I had in college, because I had a computer and I had all the best devices, but had no idea how to maximize the use of information. So we really are trying to get these ideas out into the world in as many forms as possible. And the opportunity with the course is really just to work directly with us and get the highest level of attention and coaching that you can.
Amazing. Well, Tiago, thank you so, so much for sharing this. I am beyond excited. Like I said, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I feel like there's a weight lift off your shoulder where you're like, this is actually possible. This is actually something that can be applied. So I think we've covered everything though. If you haven't, let me just see if I switch this here. Um, where's the best place to stay? I was going to add your handle, but it's not showing up right now. What is the best way for people to stay in contact with you outside of going to teachable.com/Tiago12 if you want to join Building a Second Brain, but just in general?
Yes, thanks. My website is fortelabs.co. That's FORTELABS. Forte Labs is the name of our company, and it's not .com, it's .co. So don't add the M at the end. And there you'll find the blog, which has hundreds and hundreds of free posts that you can find. There's a link to my podcast, to my YouTube channel, to my other social media sites. And I really suggest the best way to keep in touch with whatever I'm doing in this realm of building a second brain is to subscribe to my newsletter, which you can do at fortelabs.co/subscribe. And I send an email out every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, US time, with free content, events that I'm running, upcoming course launches, just whatever I'm up to that week goes out in the newsletter. It's completely 100% free, always will be. And I just really encourage people to engage with us, message us, check out our content, and let us know how we can serve you. That's really what we're here to do on this earth is just be of service and spread ideas that have a positive impact on people's lives.
Amazing. Tiago, thank you so, so much for being here, for sharing all of this. And for those of you watching, this is Monday. You could be doing so many other things. The fact that you're spending it with us, we appreciate it. And until then, we will talk to you soon, but I mean it. Please keep us posted on social if you're joining, because I would love to connect with everyone that is joining this cohort. Also, talk to you guys soon.